Look around the modern world, and you'll notice a series of strange, seemingly unrelated fractures starting to appear in everyday life. In some cities, public transit schedules are quietly being cut back, not due to a lack of funding, but because there aren't enough drivers to steer the buses. In others, local hospitals feel chronically overwhelmed, with waiting room times stretching for hours, even though the city's total population hasn't grown at all. Meanwhile, national news headlines constantly warn of looming pension crises, rising retirement ages, and slowing economic growth that governments can't seem to fix. We tend to view these as separate problems, isolated breakdowns in healthcare, labor, and state budgets. But what if they aren't separate problems at all? What if every single one of these fractures is actually a symptom of the exact same invisible change? To see what is really happening, we have to look beneath the surface of money and politics, down to the hidden foundation that modern civilization is built upon. That foundation isn't made of gold or digital bank reserves. It is made of a single, delicate mathematical relationship, the dependency ratio. Stripped of its academic phrasing, this ratio is simply the balance between the people who produce resources today and the people who depend on those resources to survive. Every modern institution we take for granted was designed with a quiet, powerful assumption that there would always be far more producers than dependents. For over a century, that assumption held true, allowing societies to build unprecedented safety nets, vast healthcare systems, and reliable retirements. But today, for the first time in human history, that balance is shifting permanently beneath our feet, causing the entire superstructure above it to groan under the weight. To understand exactly how this hidden mechanism dictates your daily life, imagine a single, self-contained town with just 55 residents. In this town, 50 residents are adults of working age. They are the producers. The remaining 5 residents are elderly retirees who have stepped away from work. Because there are 50 active workers supporting just 5 retirees, the economic math of this town is incredibly forgiving. When the town needs to fund its local hospital, fix its roads, or pay out monthly retirement pensions, the financial burden is spread across 50 working people. Each individual worker only has to contribute a tiny fraction of their daily output to ensure the retirees are fully cared for and the public services run flawlessly. The local clinic has plenty of open appointments because there are only 5 elderly residents who require frequent medical attention. Local businesses thrive because the workforce is abundant, wages are stable, and the town's stores are filled with active consumers. This is the familiar world we grew up in, a world where the sheer volume of working hands made civilization look easy to maintain. Now, let us move the clock forward by exactly 20 years. We will not change a single law in this town. We will not alter its institutions or its currency. We change only one variable: the age balance of the population. The dependency ratio shifts. 20 years later, the town now has 40 active workers and 20 elderly retirees. On paper, the town looks exactly the same. The buildings are there, the currency is the same, and the laws haven't changed. But suddenly, everything begins to struggle. The pension system that once felt incredibly cheap now feels unsustainably expensive because 40 workers must now generate the retirement income for 20 people. To keep the promises made to those retirees, the town government must ask each individual worker to surrender a much larger portion of their paycheck. But even with higher taxes, the town's total revenue shrinks because there are fewer total workers producing tangible goods and services. At the exact same time, the local hospital is suddenly crowded. Not because a new illness has arrived, but because 20 elderly residents naturally require more medical care than 5 did. The doctor is overwhelmed, appointments are booked months in advance, and the quality of care drops, leaving the younger workers frustrated by a system that feels broken. On Main Street, businesses face a double crisis. They can't find enough young employees to stay open full-time, and their customer base has shifted from buyers to savers. Nothing physical broke. No natural disaster hit the town. No corruption drained its bank accounts. The town simply crossed an invisible mathematical threshold. This is the core reality of our world today. The visible crises we read about in the news are not failures of policy, they are the natural math of a changing population structure. If this hidden shift makes you see the global economy differently, hit the subscribe button below. We decode the invisible systems shaping your future every week, and having you with us helps keep this channel running. For centuries, human society followed a predictable chain. Stable family sizes meant a steady stream of young people entered the workforce every year. Those workers drove the dependency ratio down, producing far more surplus food, energy, and tax dollars than the dependent population consumed. That surplus created system pressure in a positive direction, funding the expansion of universities, research labs, and modern infrastructure. But over the past few decades, the fundamental assumption at the very top of this chain has quietly dissolved. Across nearly every developed country, birth rates have plummeted far below the level needed to keep a population stable, while global life expectancies have climbed to historic highs. As these two massive demographic tectonic plates slide past each other, the dependency ratio shifts into reverse. Instead of a broad base of young workers supporting a small peak of retirees, our population pyramid is flipping upside down. The system pressure changes from a supportive upward push to a crushing downward weight, straining every institution built during the previous century. This mathematical strain is why national governments are no longer treating demography as a distant problem for the future. It is a crisis of the present. Look closely at how different countries across the globe are responding to this shift, and you will realize they are all trying to solve the exact same equation. In East Asia, where the shift is most acute, governments are pouring billions into automation and advanced robotics, trying to replace missing human hands with machinery. If you don't have enough young adults to run the factories or care for patients in hospitals, you build machines to mimic their labor. In parts of Europe and North America, the primary valve has been immigration, drawing in working-age adults from regions of the world where the dependency balance is still favorable. By absorbing millions of ready-made workers from abroad, these nations are effectively importing the producers they failed to raise at home. Instead, governments are turning to the most direct, yet unpopular lever available, forcing people to remain in the workforce longer by raising the legal retirement age. If the pool of younger workers is shrinking, the only way to keep the machine running is to prevent older workers from leaving it. At the same time, massive investments are flowing into artificial intelligence, software automation, and efficiency tools designed to boost the output of every remaining employee. The goal is simple. If one worker 20 years ago could produce enough surplus to support a fraction of a dependent, a worker today must be engineered to produce twice as much. Every policy debate, every economic reform, and every technological breakthrough you see in the news isn't an isolated event. They are all desperate attempts to rebalance the scales, to keep the number of active producers aligned with the growing mountain of dependence. But these stopgap solutions face a harsh reality. Immigration requires a global surplus of youth that is rapidly evaporating as birth rates drop worldwide. Automation takes decades to deploy at scale, and raising the retirement age can only go so far before human biology reaches its physical limit. We are discovering that you can manipulate the financial numbers on a government spreadsheet for a long time, but you cannot escape the physical reality of human labor. Money is merely a claim check on future production. If there are no future hands available to bake the bread, build the homes, or run the power plants, the money becomes meaningless. This realization brings us to a much larger, more profound truth about the world we are entering. This was never really a story about an aging population. It was never a story about old people or underfunded pensions or crowded hospital corridors. Those are simply the surface ripples on a deep ocean. This is a story about the single, invisible assumption that quietly shaped the modern world. The assumption that tomorrow would always look like yesterday. That the conveyor belt of human generations would keep moving forward forever without interruption. For the past century, we built a complex, high-speed civilization on the gamble that an endless army of young adults would always arrive to inherit the labor. Now that gamble is expiring. The foundation is shifting, and the math is forcing us to confront a reality we never planned for. The global economic machine is not stopping because of a lack of capital or a lack of resources. It is straining because the balance has broken. If the number of dependents continues to swell, while the generation of producers shrinks smaller every single year, the entire structure faces an ultimate question. A question that will dictate the future of our economies, our standard of living, and our daily survival over the next 50 years. If fewer and fewer workers must support more and more people, who will do all the work?